Hi, 7th period. I'm sure you missed me already, so of course you can listen to my voice just like I'm there. We have a couple of goals today. The first is to investigate the diameter and circumference of circles. Next, we'll calculate the circumference of a circle, and then also develop vocabulary for the geometry of circles. In this video, I'm going to ask you a couple times to pause and actually work out the problems. Please make sure you do that. If you're not doing that, you're only hurting yourselves. And if I go too fast at any point, again, you can just pause and rewatch any part of the video. So, in your materials, you should have a resource page that has a circle on it like this. For this part of the activity, you're going to need a pair of scissors as well as tape. And some string. So any of the materials that you need to get, probably the scissors and the tape, go ahead and pause the video and get what you need for this part of the activity now. Once you have your materials, the first thing that I'd like you to do is draw a diameter on the circle. And it does need to be accurate, so you actually may want to go get a ruler. Again, if you need to pause the video, go ahead and pause the video. Once you draw in your diameter, it should look like this. Again, you could have your diameter going vertically as well, since mine's going horizontally. What I need you to do next is stretch a piece of string across the diameter and cut the string to that length. So you're going to line up your string with your diameter, cut it to this length. After you're finished with that, cut another 2 pieces of string that are exactly the same length. Go ahead and pause the video and do this now. When you're ready, tape your first piece of string along the circumference of your circle. So you're actually going to take your piece of tape and line up your piece of string along the outside here. Take a couple pieces of tape to get it right on the line, and you're going to put it on the circumference of your circle. Estimate the fraction of the circumference you have covered with the diameter. So I want you to write down what fraction you think that piece of string is covering on the circumference. If you wrote down 1/3, then you are correct. You're going to tape another piece of string along the circumference of your circle. So wherever your first piece of string stopped, you're going to take your second piece of string and continue to line it up across the circumference of your circle. Go ahead and pause the video if you need to. Estimate the fraction of the circumference you have covered with the diameter. Write down your estimate below the circle. If you wrote down 2/3 this time, you are correct. Tape the last piece of string along the circumference of your circle. Again, make sure that it starts where your last piece of string has ended. Connect it to either of the other 2 pieces. Is there a gap left over? Would another diameter fit in the gap? Write down your answers to these 2 questions. There should be a gap, but another whole diameter should not fit in that space if you've lined things up correctly. In a complete sentence, explain how many diameters are in a circumference. Write this below the circle as well. you should have found that there are slightly more than 3 diameters. All of this is going to relate to pi. It says pi is the name of the number that is the ratio circumference divided by the diameter for any circle. Because its value is not an exact integer or fraction, you must use an approximation when you calculate with it. There are several different approximations you can use for pi, depending on how accurate you need to be. You need to consider the purpose of your calculation when you choose which approximation to use. So we're going to define pi a little bit, and I'm going to show you how what we just did relates to circumference. So on your toolkit now part of your materials, fill this in along with me. The circumference of a circle is we've talked about this before, perimeter of the circle. That is the distance around the circle. To find the circumference of a circle using its diameter, you're going to use this formula. Circumference equals pi times the diameter. Now, this would make sense for what we just did, because if pi is a rough estimate is about 3, we took 3 of the times the diameters and got about the circumference. So that's going to make sense for what we just showed with the string around the resource page. Now, if you want to use the radius instead, let's say you are just given the radius, you would then do 2 pi times the radius, because of course 2 radiuses together would give you the diameter. As I said before, there's different situations when you may use different forms of pi. So a rough estimation or a mental calculation, if you were going to do it quick, you could just multiply by 3. You could also, if you were using fractions, you would use 3 1/7, or most times I see it as 22/7. Either one would be correct. Scientific calculation, there is actually a pi button on your calculator, so if you're near the blue calculators, you can look on there and there should actually be a pi button. We're actually not going to use that, but it goes out as many digits as will show on the calculator. We're going to go with this one, decimal to the nearest hundredth. When you calculate things for homework or on a test or quiz, we're just going to go ahead and use 3.14. So that's the most important one for you really to remember. Underneath your toolkit, you have a few questions. So go ahead and read through these. Pause the video, answer them with your partner, and then we'll go ahead and talk about the answers. So pause the video now, answer A and B. Now that you've taken some time to answer the questions, letter A said, if you know the radius of a circle, what will you do to find the circumference? You would multiply the radius by 2 to get the diameter, and then multiply by pi, which in our case will be 3.14. If you know the circumference of a circle, what will you do to find the diameter? Well, you kind of work backwards in your formula. So you would divide the circumference by pi, or again in our case, 3.14. Continuing on your paper, you have a chart that looks like this. What you're going to do is you're going to take and find the circumference of circle A, B, and C. Now, they'd like you to find this in 3 different ways. With the rough estimate, as you remember from your toolkit, you're just going to simply multiply by 3. Now, be careful. Make sure that you are using your diameter. The fraction calculation, they would like a fraction answer. So if you remember from that chart on the front, you're going to use 22 over 7. And finally, the scientific notation. I'm thinking they probably want you to use the pi button on your calculator. Just go ahead and use that and round to the nearest tenth this time, one number after the decimal. So the only one you should really be using calculator for is the last one. And I'm going to ask now that you go ahead and pause the video again, get your 9 answers here, and then you can hit play and check your answers. Now that you've had some time to come up with your answers, I will go ahead and go through and give you what you should have. So for letter A, you should have 36. For B, for the rough estimate, you should have 12 3/4 or 12.75. And for the last one, you should have 9. For your fraction calculation, the improper fraction would be 264 over 7, 187 over 14, and 66 over 7, or 9 3/7. Finally, your scientific calculation would be 37.7, 13.4, and 9.4. Next, I have 3 more questions for you. So go ahead again with your partner, pause the video, read through the questions, give your best answer, and then I will provide you with the answers to check. Now that you've had some time to come up with your answers, for letter A, they wanted you to find the circumference of a circle with a diameter of 16 inches. Remember, again, you should have used 3.14. Letter A, your answer would be 50.3 inches. For letter B, with a circle with a radius of 3.5 centimeters, you should have 22 centimeters. For letter C, a circle with a perimeter of 56 meters, your answer should have been just 56 meters because perimeter and circumference are the same thing. You have one last job to do today, and what you're going to do is you're going to complete the practice page of finding the radius, diameter, and circumference. You need to use 3.14 for pi when you're finding out this information, and please round to hundredths. Check your answers with the substitute when you're finished. When you're doing these, you may use a calculator. However, this is what I'm expecting to see. Like we did when we were finding area, I should see the formula. Followed by what you're actually multiplying. And I'll use 10 as an example for the diameter. Followed by an answer. This is what I'll be looking for on a test or quiz. When you're done, you can work on homework or read a book when you're finished and you've checked your answers. That's all I have for you today. If you have any questions, we can go over it when I come back. That's it. Have a great day. Bye, guys.